And we're back. So we got a next speaker ready. He's very nervous. It is. Maybe. Let's see. And who we have next? This is the slide. Yeah, this is the one. So next we have Brent Hoes. Hopefully I'm saying the name properly, unless he's going to just say, no, you did a terrible job, but let's see. So he's a PHP developer advocate at PHP Storm. I'm pretty sure you're familiar with that EDE. And opinions aside, and he has like this talk for us. So it's a sad talk. Apparently generics aren't coming. Apparently. Let's see what he has to say about that. So,
hey man.
click here. Oh, shoot. No.
Hey, you removed me. Okay, there we are.
Take it easy, man. Take it easy. Hey. So, apparently generics aren't coming. I don't want to spoil us anything. So, go easy, because that's a touchy subject. So did I say your last name properly?
No, definitely not. But it's okay. Kaneko, it's okay. It's fine. Okay.
So how do you pronounce it?
Rosa.
Rosa. Oh, okay. I will.
It's actually it's the Dutch word for pink, but it's written differently. So in English it would be Brent Pink with 2 eyes. Anyway.
Like Bing? Like Chandler Bing?
No, like pink, like the color pink.
Pink. Okay. Okay. So how are you? All good?
Yeah, I'm definitely not nervous, by the way. And I learned the perfect lesson from the last talk. Like, there is no such thing as work in progress. I think that's great. I'm going to write it down somewhere and paste it above my bed or something.
You know the Laravel community, right? So
well, there's no such thing as work in progress, Kaneko.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure that David Hempel just throw the table in here. So there's no whip. What?
I do it myself. So
yeah, every single time.
Yeah, I mean, in real life projects, like for real clients, this is something when I worked at Spatie. This was an ongoing discussion as well. I was in the non-whip camp, definitely, but yeah, I didn't win.
So how's PHP Storm going?
Oh, great. Yeah. Do you mean like PHP Storm itself or my job at PHP Storm?
PHP Storm itself as in EDA, but you in there.
What did you mean, by the way, with everyone their own opinion when you said that? Aren't you a PHP Storm user?
There's always the war between EDEs, right? So there's the other guys around, because I don't want to name it, because now it's more PHP Storm area here, and you're alive with me, and I want to pull that off. But there are opinions between what's the best one. There'll always be. It depends.
I'm actually going to show a feature that might change people's opinions about PHP Storm, about its usefulness. So
let's see. I'm going to put you live with your slides, and bring it on, buddy. Bring it on.
Yes, thanks. So, okay, here we are. Hi, everyone. Again, thanks for having me today. I want to talk about generics in PHP. It's this topic that many people talk about. And whenever you ask about people's wish list for PHP, generics is right there on top. So today, I want to give you a brief introduction about generics, because not everyone is familiar with them, but I hope that I can convince you about their usefulness pretty quickly, because as soon as everyone here is up to speed with what generics are, I want to dive into the question, why don't we have them? If they are such a requested feature in PHP, what's going on there? It's actually a pretty interesting topic that goes from static analysis to internal development, to questioning the very core of what PHP actually is. So that's the plan today. I'm Brent. I'm a developer advocate for PHP at JetBrains, and we create PHP Storm. I'm also the host of PHP Annotated. That's our YouTube channel. Subscribe if you haven't. And I have a blog you might have heard of called Stitcher.io. So let's explain generics. I need to make an assumption. That is that you don't like bugs in your code. You go to great lengths to prevent them. You write tests. Maybe you have some automation in place. Maybe a dedicated QA team. Another thing you can do to prevent bugs is to use stricter type checking. Because the more information you have available about data that's flowing throughout your code, the more accurate you can deal with that data. An array is just an array. It could contain anything, but a collection, a specific collection class that only accepts a specific type of object, well, that's a bit safer. There are less edge cases you need to think about, because if you have an instance of this post collection here, you can be certain there are only posts in it, because PHP's type system has checked that for you. Now, on top of that, you get autocompletion and code insights in your IDE, simply because it has more information available about your code. Now, PHP's type system it's kind of weird. It checks types at runtime. Now, why is that weird? It sounds pretty obvious at first, doesn't it? We're only adding data to our collection when we're running our code. So naturally, PHP can only check that data when our code is running. Well, in an isolated example, the reasoning makes sense. But what if you add types all throughout your code base? Suddenly, you get a lot more certainty that things will work just by reading your code. We're sure that this collection can only contain post objects because it extends array iterator and checks whether a new item actually is an instance of post. We're also sure that when we create this collection, we're only adding post objects to it because their type has been checked when calling this function here. We're also certain that this is actually a post object because we've created it here while knowing its type. And we're also certain that this post got the right data because its properties are type checked as well. Now, all of this to say, the more types you add, the more certainty you get that your code won't break while running. And all of that without actually running it. Now, that doesn't mean that your code is bug-free, but it does help quite a lot. And this, press too quickly. This practice of being able to validate your code while running it, it's incredibly powerful. It has the potential to save quite a lot of time and has the potential to prevent bugs in production code. So let's do my poll now. There should be a poll in Hopin here, and yeah, Kaneko, you can come back here for a second because you should give me the results. Actually, do you use types in PHP? That's the question, and I hope you can see the results somewhere, Kaneko.
Just 1 second.
Yeah, definitely.
Let me put some background music until I
get
the answer.
Okay, but I also wanted to ask you, by the way, this question. Do you use types in PHP?
So from the past 6 months, I'm starting to use and abuse them.
Abuse them? Awesome.
Abuse them.
Why?
To be honest. Yeah, and has been pretty fun. Adding everywhere, but only on a substantial project. Always, not on just a simple code. Is not as much.
Okay.
I think
gotcha.
The answers are starting to appear.
Cool.
Yeah.
Can you see the results?
I got the results.
Okay, tell me.
Yeah. Are you ready for them?
No. Go ahead.
So 99.3% say yes.
That's way more than I expected, actually.
Maybe we got to thank PHP Storm for that, maybe.
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, okay.
Just
That,
throw
that's
that
that's
text.
yeah, it's a huge majority. Pretty cool. Okay, so it means that we have a little bit of like a feeling what our audience is used to. So I'm going to continue, Kaneko. You can go backstage again, and I'll call you when I need you. Okay, so one important side note to make is that even when you use types, you will always need some kind of entry point somewhere in your program, a place where you're dealing with raw input data and where that data needs to be cast into something else. And you cannot really escape that. If we're talking about HTTP applications, everything is basically a string coming from request data. So the edges of our code will always have to deal with typecasting and data validation, error handling. But for the rest of our code, being able to check types, it really pays off. Now, that brings us to static analysis. Because doing all these checks by hand, it gets difficult pretty fast. Static analyzers are tools that read our code without running it, and they find places where types don't really line up. They essentially tell you about places where your code could break if you were to run it without actually running it. Now, this automation of type checking is when you really start to feel the power of a type system. PHP, it has a couple of static analyzers. There's PHP Stan and SOM. And there's also Fan, that's created by Rasmus, the creator of PHP. And of course, there are IDEs like PHP Storm, which also have a dedicated static analyzer. Now, there's an important distinction to make between IDEs like PHP Storm and static analyzer tools like PHP Stan or SOM, because PHP Storm's first goal is to help you write code. So its static analysis happens in real time. While tools like PHP Stan, they scan your code in bulk and report errors at once. Now, these two aren't mutually exclusive. It's easier for PHP Stan to do very in-depth analysis because it doesn't have that real-time constraint, while PHP Storm's strength is to help guide you while writing code. Now, I want to give you a couple of examples of what static analysis can do. PHP Storm, the classic one, has autocompletion while typing. It knows this post variable has these properties because post has gotten a type somewhere. PHP Stan can detect whether a condition's else block can't be reached because it understands how Boolean expressions work. What if you have a method that doesn't return anything, but try to call it and store its value into a variable somewhere? It's perfectly possible that someone, maybe on your team or in an open source repository, that they wrote this parse method and you don't know exactly what it does. And static analysis will guide you towards the right solution without having to read documentation, for example. And truly, the power of all these tools is that they read your code, they don't run it. They detect errors and make code suggestions solely based on text. And of course, types play a crucial role in understanding that text. Now, okay, time for a next poll. Do you use static analysis tools? Kaneko, you can come back. And I'm going to ask the question to you as well while people are filling in the poll.
Here.
So, do you use static analysis tools, Kaneko?
That's a little bit tricky. Not as much as I wanted to be fair, honest.
Okay.
I'm trying to add more of it since the projects now are getting more developers on it.
Yeah.
If you have more than one, more than yourself, it's a better option, even for yourself. But when you add another member to the team, yeah, that's a pretty good reason to add static analysis.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. There is definitely some overhead in setting all of this up and facilitating these tools. I'm actually going to talk about that in a minute. So, do you have any results for me? Because now that 99% of people said they use types, I'm very curious about static analysis tools.
Regarding that, Paul, Max is saying that one say no. He's asking who.
Who? No, we're not going to shame anyone into. People can have their opinion. It's totally fine.
I say I'll also say no. Depends on the project. So
Mhm.
maybe it was me. Maybe
Okay. But what about
no.
this poll? Do you have some results?
I'm waiting for the poll results to get in. I
Oh,
feel like
okay.
Eurovision all of the sudden. I'm
Exactly.
just
And
waiting for the poll results.
10 points go to Psalm, and 2 points go to No, actually, no, never mind.
So do you want? I'm going to pull the yes again on
Yeah,
screen.
that's fine.
I
Yeah.
already have the poll results. Are you ready for that?
Uh, no. Very curious.
So 78.4% say
Okay.
yes.
Well, that's very interesting. So I think from like surveys that JetBrains has done and Stack Overflow has done, um, like these dev eco surveys, numbers are more like 30 to 40%. I think the Laravel survey was the last one. It had, I think, 40%. There is an increase. So, there's nothing wrong with 78% of people saying yes now, because it just means there's a 79. It keeps growing. Okay. Um, this is there's a subset of the PHP community here, which is totally fine. It's a very high number. So, but that's very, very good, because it means uh, most of you are with me in the story that I'm telling. So great. Let me continue. I'm going to send you back, Kaneko, and let's continue here, because I was going to explain generics, right? The thing about types is that they become boring pretty fast. There is some textual overhead to using them, like I just told Kaneko. You have to write them. Imagine that we have 10 different kinds of objects that need collections. Will we write 10 different implementations? And we could add some abstractions, but still, this, quite honestly, is a mess. So this is where generics come in. Instead of writing 10 times the same class with only the types being different, you could write one generic implementation with placeholder types. Now, if you have this, then you can pop in the right type when you need it. It's a form of code reuse on the type system level. Now, big disclaimer, this syntax isn't possible in PHP, but it is the syntax that's used in many other languages. So I'm using it here to explain the concept as if it was available in PHP. Now, if we were able to do something like this, we would have all the advantages of a type of using a type checker, error detection, and auto-completion, but with a lot less boilerplate. And I know that the example of a collection is like the classic one to explain generics, but there's so much more that can be done when you have the concept of generics available. ORMs that return a specific entity or model class from their query builder is one example. You could introduce a concept of a generic class string, and then you can make functions that resolve an object of that class from a dependency container, for example, all while ensuring type safety. Now, truly, generics are a wonderfully versatile tool, and I understand why they are so high on people's wish list. But we don't have them in PHP. In fact, I already told you why we cannot have generics. And that is because PHP checks types at runtime. PHP does everything at runtime. It's an interpreted language. There's no compiler that can do type checks while compiling. It all needs to happen on the fly in real time. Now, static analyzers, they run apart from PHP itself because it takes some time to scan and understand your code base. A PHP, Stan, and Psalm, they scan your code on the fly, and it just takes some time. PHP Storm has that infamous indexing when booting your project. All of this time goes to understanding your code base. And honestly, this is time that you couldn't spend with every request in PHP itself. Now, to be clear, this is PHP's number one strength. The fact that you can make changes, refresh the page, and it's all just there, your changes, without waiting for a compiler. But it is also PHP's weakness because it prevents us from having things that are trivial or more trivial in other languages, like generics. So to clarify why they are so difficult to add in PHP, let's take a closer look at how generics could be implemented. Because there are three possible ways. The first one is called monomorphic generics. It's a difficult word, but it essentially means that PHP would do the copy-paste work for us behind the scenes. It takes something that has multiple forms, polymorph, and creates individual implementations for them called monomorph. So a generic collection class could be split into individual implementations, one for post, one for comments, one for likes. And it's PHP generating all of these classes for us behind the scenes because it uses that generic template that we defined in our code. But doing so requires resources, CPU time, and memory. In fact, it would require so many resources that our programs would become noticeably slower. And yeah, that's not good. So the next solution is called reified generics. And they seem like a pretty good fit for PHP because essentially these are runtime generics. They are generics that are checked on the fly at runtime, whose type information is available via reflection, which is basically how PHP's type system works today. And the main problem with reified generics is that they require a pretty big refactor to PHP's core. And on top of that, they would introduce lots of complexity throughout the code base. And when Nikita was still working on PHP, he did look in this possibility. It's possible in theory, but Nikita and others felt that the end doesn't really justify the means. This is what Nikita said about it. Complexity is a pretty big problem for us, and that's PHP internals. I think it's severely underestimated by non-contributors. Now, to be clear, the difficulties lie in the details. Stuff like handling references and type inference are pretty complex when combined with generics. And so we're stuck. Generics aren't coming to PHP. They would have too big an impact on either PHP's performance or maintenance, and it's just not worth it. But I told you there were three options, right? The last one is perfectly doable. It doesn't have much, if any, runtime performance impact, and it is pretty trivial to implement. The only thing needed is a mind shift, which might actually be the most difficult problem to overcome. It's called type erasure. It basically means that PHP would get generic syntax, and that's it. It wouldn't do any type checks at runtime. So how does that make sense? Why would you add generics and then not use them? Well, remember when I explained type systems and how PHP is kind of weird doing its checks at runtime? I already showed you how static analyzers, they don't need to run your code to detect problems as long as we provide enough types. They can detect a range of bugs for us. And we don't have to run our code to run type checks. So that means we don't have to worry about runtime performance issues. So this is that mind switch. We might not need runtime types. Static analyzers provide an even better level of safety without all the runtime problems. So this is what Nikita said when I asked him about runtime type checks versus static analyzers. He said, if you're using a static analyzer, then no, I don't think runtime type checking adds a lot of value. So that's not me saying it. There's a problem though, two, actually. First, not everyone wants to use a static analyzer. Second, PHP uses runtime type information for things besides type checking. Type juggling is a thing in PHP, and frameworks use type information for auto-wiring dependencies, just to name two examples. But these problems can be overcome. First, it's safe to assume that people who want to use generics are in that strictly typed, statically checked camp. They want generics mainly because of the value they provide statically and not at runtime. Second, PHP could still expose generics via reflection and might even be able to use it for type juggling if needed. Because remember, the main problem with type checking was with type checking and type inference, and those problems would be moved to the static side. Now, type erasure isn't anything new. Python does it, for example. All Python's types are treated as comments during runtime, and Python trusts their users who want type safety to use static analyzes. Makes sense because that's where the majority of value comes from when using types, to check them statically. Now, as you might be able to guess, I'm in that strictly typed, statically checked camp. I would love to have statically checked generics because they would save me so much time and would make my programming life much easier. So from my point of view, type erasure or runtime ignored generics, that would be the perfect solution for PHP. They would have no runtime performance impact. It would be pretty trivial to implement because the difficult parts are outsourced to static analyzes, and we'd still get all the benefits from generics thanks to static analysis. Now, the main problem is this is so different than what the PHP community is used to. Python's approach, it works because people have never known it to be any different. It also erases all its types and not just generics. So PHP, on the other hand, already checks types at runtime. So it would be pretty weird if we'd add generics and have them be the only part of PHP that isn't type checked at runtime. So that's what I mean when I say that a mind shift is required. This simple solution to generics raises lots of questions about PHP as a programming language. Maybe PHP will evolve towards not checking types at runtime one day. Maybe one day PHP will have an official opt-in static analyzer. Rasmus actually talked about this at one point, but it's a pretty big thing to get right. Maybe there can be multiple editions of PHP, one with generics and a required static type checking step, and one without generics, but with its existing runtime type checks. Nikita did hint at the concept of PHP editions in the past, but unfortunately, Nikita has moved on from PHP. And on top of that, complexity is a pretty big thing, remember. So as you can see, lots of questions which makes a type erasure, unfortunately, unlikely to happen. So now I can truly say we're stuck. Generics aren't coming to PHP. Pause for dramatic effect. But if you're using static analyzers in PHP today, which the majority of you are, which is great, you're probably thinking at this point, all of this is possible. Maybe you even wrote it in chat already. I don't have chat here. There are 58 comments. Yeah, maybe some of you already mentioned it. Remember how Python treats type annotations as comments? Well, what's stopping us from doing so as well? Nothing. Statically checked generics are available in PHP, be it within doc comments, and also without an official specification. Its syntax is a bit more verbose than when you'd use native syntax, especially with those additional template annotations. There are also subtle differences between static analyzes, which is a thing. But in general, runtime ignored generics exist and work pretty much as I described. No runtime type checks, everything checked by static analyzers like PHP Stan or Psalm. And on top of that, PHP Storm does its best to support as many generic doc comments as possible in real time, following the syntax that Psalm or PHP Stan or Psalm proposed. But of course, there are subtle differences. But most of the benefits of generics combined with static type checking in your IDE and with static analysis, well, that's available in PHP today. But yeah, there are some downsides, right? I already said there isn't any official specification, which leads to small differences between implementations. And it also makes it so that PHP Storm is often slower to implement new generic features, trying to follow what other static analyzers are doing. Also, these are comments. So they are more ugly and verbose than when you'd have native syntax. And yeah, there are inconsistent with PHP's existing type system because you need to mix built-in types and doc comments. It gets kind of ugly, but they do work. They solve 90% of use cases when you need generics. They aren't perfect, but let's be honest, no one expects PHP to be perfect, right? So, final poll: do you use generics? Kaneka, come back and let me ask that question to you as well. I'm so curious to learn the result in the poll. Oh, are you okay?
No, I'm sad. Generics are coming, man.
Uh, yeah, I know. But do you use
How you deal with that? How you mentally live yourself with with this
hope
knowledge?
hope can echo doing these kinds of talks and hoping that people get inspired enough to kind of advocate for it and to get a lot of momentum going so that this might actually end up in PHP one day. It's actually interesting. I talked about this with Sarah Goldman, who's PHP internal contributor, and she said she thinks this is very likely to happen within a couple of years, maybe a decade, but she said the community isn't ready for it now. So I'm doing my part, trying to make the community ready for it. Yeah,
Fingers crossed,
yeah,
everyone. Fingers crossed.
exactly. But do you use like doc comment generics? Have you
Yeah.
ever used them?
Like the first example for the type in a big project, we need to add them.
Yeah,
But on small ones, we just go with the flow, whip,
yeah,
comment, whatever.
yeah.
No rules whatsoever.
Hmm.
Oh, I got the results
Already.
already.
Now I'm most curious about these ones. I have no
So
idea.
I'm going to pull the biggest number, and
And then I can guess which one it is.
are you ready for this one? Are you ready?
No, no, I'm not ready. But go ahead.
So 47.5%
Oh,
says no.
they don't use it.
They don't use
Okay.
it.
I
So you're
actually,
not bad as us.
it's actually within my expectations. I actually would have thought a lot more people, maybe a bit more. I would have thought like 60% would have said no. So, um,
But let me just add the no
yeah.
but
Ah, okay.
so we see here some light. So it
Yeah.
goes more or less like all together almost
Hmm.
50-50. Almost.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's
Okay.
it.
Well, cool. Thanks for helping me out. I'm
No
going
worries.
to continue
You know,
sharing some more thoughts and see you soon. So, where does all of this leave us? Personally, I would want a proper spec for generics, even if it's just a document that third-party static analyzes and IDEs should adhere to. It would be nice if this spec was endorsed by all static analyzers and IDEs, as well as, and this is important, the PHP internals. The second thing I want is, of course, native syntax instead of doc comments. I dislike having to write part of my type definitions in PHP and another part in comments. And also, it wouldn't be the first feature to promote from comments to native syntax. Just to say there is some precedence here. Let me name two pretty significant changes. In the past, we wrote types as comments in PHP. Remember that time? Uh, yeah, we moved away from those as well. We now have some kind of type system in PHP. It's definitely better than what we used to do. Uh, Except, of course, the fact that PHP checks types at runtime, which is a bit weird, but let's move on from that point. Also, PHP 8 added attributes. Remember that when we wrote annotations in doc comments? I don't think many of us regret that evolution. Just to say, there is some precedence. Some features have promoted from doc comments to native syntax. Now, next on my wish list, I really like Rasmus's idea of having an opt-in first-party static analyzer for PHP. I doubt it will ever come, especially since third-party tools like PHP Stan are really good. But still, in a perfect world, and if we could do it all over again, right? Finally, I wouldn't mind PHP not doing any runtime type checks. It's okay to have type information available at runtime for performance reasons, and also to do meta programming with reflection. So I'm not saying I would ditch PHP's type system, runtime type system altogether. But type checking, I will let PHP Storm and PHP Stan handle those for me. They are much better at it anyway. So yeah, generics in PHP. We started with a pretty clear feature request, right? And we ended up questioning the very nature of PHP. I think it's a good thought experiment, and I think we need to keep questioning where PHP is going. The best thing that we userland developers can do is to support internals. So definitely go check out the PHP Foundation and what they are doing. And it's also worth checking out PHP Stan and SAM to learn how you can contribute and support them. I do wonder how we will look back on this whole generics debate 10 years from now. So if you're watching this talk in 2033, then you're free to remind me that we're 10 years later, and we can talk about it then. But we can talk about it now as well. So really, share your thoughts with me. I'm going to read through all the comments here. There are 70 comments already. And let's connect on Slack or in chat here to keep talking about it. I think it's a super interesting topic. And yeah, I want to hear from you. With all of that being said, thanks for being here. Thank you for making PHP awesome. And until next time, bye-bye.
So
hey,
you pull it through. You were nervous, man. You were nervous. Yeah, it's a touchy subject, but yeah, you're not. You're not.
I'm okay. I'm okay.
So thanks for that. Thanks for putting some drama on the developer side again, because we always like a little bit of drama.
I still need to read through the comments, so I have no idea how people are reacting.
There are some spicy ones. You need to read them through. So I got here some questions.
Mm-hmm.
So I got a question from Anonymous 11.
Wow.
I don't know. The username is really anonymous. It's not
okay.
Yeah. The user Anonymous 11 is important.
Okay.
He's asking how to avoid verbose code with types.
Yeah. Type inference. So it's one thing to add generics or types in general. It's another thing for your type system to be as smart so that it understands when you assign, for example, an integer to a variable or add a string to an array. Your type system should be smart enough to detect, hey, this is the first time a value is added to this array. I can infer that its generic type or whatever should be string and should not change from now on. But that's especially difficult in PHP because we have type juggling, and PHP is a very loosely typed language. So it's one thing to add generics. It's a whole other thing to make the type system less verbose. If generics ever get added, I promise I will start advocating for a better type checker. But that's a story for another time.
More content for your blog.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and awesome work on that, by the way. Next question from Simon Hampa. He's asking, where could something like Ryan Chandler's PHP fix or PXP fit? PXP fit into the conversation about generics.
Yeah, I deliberately left it out in this talk. But it's something I've been talking about as well. So the idea of pre-processing, right? We've seen it happen in JavaScript. There's TypeScript, which compiles to JavaScript and that is then run in the browser. We could do the same with PHP. We could create a new language that kind of looks like PHP, but compiles to PHP and then runs as native PHP. And especially with types, that makes sense because, again, we don't really need runtime type checks. We might as well remove all types except for the thing that PHP still uses it at runtime for other things besides type checking. Yeah, so the idea of a preprocessor is super interesting. And Ryan is doing the latest edition of it. People have tried it in the past and kind of failed. Ryan is making a superset of PHP that compiles to PHP. But the most important thing with all these supersets is that they have static analysis and static insights, especially in IDEs. If you don't have IDE support, it's basically like writing text without any guidance. So Ryan is working on a language server protocol for PXP, which is great, which is the first time that's happening. And which is also pretty cool is that PHP Storm and actually all IntelliJ IDEs added support for LSP in the previous major version. So Ryan initially set it out to have his LSP work in VS Code. But like by coincidence, at the same time, oh yeah, I did mention okay. At the same time, we actually like 1 or 2 weeks later released, and this wasn't like deliberate or anything, but we released LSP support. So it's still a complex topic to get right, because it's not like, oh yeah, just plop in an LSP server and I'm done. There's quite a lot of complexity there. I do hope that Ryan manages to get it working. So it's a hobby project, which is also I really wish Ryan all the best in this. But TypeScript was created at Microsoft with a team of developers over the course. Like I think I don't know how many developers, but a full team of developers worked on it for a year and a half before the first release was made publicly. Yeah, it's very difficult. Facebook tried it with Hack, of course. Then PHP got kind of similar performance, which is why many people moved back to PHP. Then Facebook made a separate compiler for Hack, making it not transpiling anymore to PHP, which kind of means it's something different now.
Yeah, it fell through.
So yeah.
Okay.
But it would be a viable option, although it has some very difficult hurdles to overcome.
Let's see what comes first: PHP, generics,
exactly,
or Ryan. Ryan, the bet is on you, man.
Yeah, Ryan Lang.
Pull it through. So last question from Andrew De Jong. He's very curious about one thing.
Yeah.
Where did Nikita move on to?
To LLVM, which is, if I'm not mistaken, like even more compiler stuff, much more difficult than PHP. And he works for Red Hat now. And it was just, I think I don't think. I think he mentioned it on externals. He kind of got boring of PHP, bored of PHP, which is, I mean, it's understandable. Nikita is like such a smart guy, and we were so lucky to have him for the period of time that he was with PHP. Kind of makes sense that he moved on, but it's unfortunate for us. But on the other hand, let me take the opportunity here to mention the PHP Foundation again. We're also sponsoring it, and my colleague Roman is kind of administering and managing the foundation. But there's no benefit for me in telling you about it, besides the fact that this is really our best hope for PHP to keep evolving in the right direction. Yeah. So if you're a company that uses PHP, I would highly recommend to check out PHP Foundation's website and consider donating. They just hired or are hiring a couple of new developers, people that work on PHP as their job or part-time job. They get paid for it. So it's our best hope, honestly.
Important.
Yeah,
it's important. So with that settled, thank you, Brent, for the amazing talk and amazing thoughts that you leave for everyone to think about it.
Yes.
So see you next year. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.